Hi, Mandy.
And we are live. Great. Hello, IC Healers. It's Dr. LaGreca here, and I'm here with Joia, a very special patient of mine who I've been working with over the last 5 months. And I know a lot of you who've seen me putting the posts up about Joia, you probably were very interested in hearing her story because you have your own story. And it's really good to be able to hear other people's because you realize that you're not in this alone. So I wanted to bring her on for a couple of reasons. One, Joia is a fighter. Okay, if I were to give you, a term to describe her and what I've learned from her is she's not going to give up. That's one thing. And I know that with all the complications that she's had, it could be very easy to walk away. I personally don't think I could have gone through all that, to be honest with you. She has a lot, and I want you to be able to hear this because this makes you realize that, A, you might find out that your situation is not as bad, and B, you might realize that there is always a light at the other side. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And so by bringing her on, it serves a couple of purposes. I want you to hear her story, and I want you to also get hope from her story because she's a fighter and she is on the mend. She is getting better. She's been working with me for a while. She's not healed yet. So this isn't a nice healing story. They're not always going to be healing stories, but I think because she's on the journey and she's going through it, it's going to be really good for you guys to hear what she's doing. And it might give you some insight as to what might be going on in your body. So I want to welcome you to Joia. Hi, Joia.
Hi, Dr. Mandy. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So let's start from the beginning. Because as you know, when we met, one of the first things I did was I had you tell your story. And I created a timeline. And as you were talking, I was putting all this information on a timeline. And it kind of gives me as a practitioner some insight as to what happened and what may have been some of your triggers. So tell the listener about your story. Specifically, when were you diagnosed? What your symptoms were, which made you go get diagnosed, and how this all affected you, like mentally and physically.
For sure. Okay, so I actually didn't even know I had IC. My story began when I was 21 and I'm almost 30. So at 21 years old, I felt kind of like pain down below. I was having difficulty like urinating. I felt pressure. So I thought to myself, let me just go to the walk-in clinic. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. Left a urine sample. They called me and said it was a UTI and that it was no big deal. Like I was going to take antibiotics and we would be good. So I took the antibiotics and I finished the dose, and all that pain and urgency and frequency was still there. So I went back and I explained all that. I left another urine sample, still had bacteria, more antibiotic. So this bacteria antibiotic journey went on for about 8 months. The bacteria just would not go away. And it was like I was just living with a UTI for about 8 months and just taking back to back to back antibiotics. And then finally, when the bacteria was no longer in the culture any longer, so it was gone apparently, I was still left with urgency, frequency, partial retention, hesitation upon starting like the urine stream, and just an overall like heaviness. Like I couldn't go far from the washroom because pee was always coming out. Yeah, and I was peeing probably every 15 to 20 minutes in the early stages, in my early 20s.
Wow, every 50, even overnight.
Yeah, the nights actually were pretty rough. Sometimes I would actually fall asleep on the toilet, resting my head like on the counter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then
So people listening can probably relate to that particular debilitating symptom.
yes. And then eventually my mom kind of stepped in and was like, I think we need to see a urologist, like enough with this antibiotic and the doctor not really knowing what to say. So we went to a urologist and he basically was just saying, oh, it's just frequent UTIs. Let's go do a cystoscopy, which is where they go inside your like bladder through the urethra with like a little scope, a camera. I was young. I don't know. I didn't know any better. Like nobody in my family had these issues. So when they mentioned that, we all thought, oh, it's serious. It's bad. Like Joia has to do it. So I did it. I was awake for it. It was very painful.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was very painful. And apparently he claims the urologist saw some redness. So that kind of made him believe that like, oh, the bladder wall was damaged from the infection. So now I was going to be put on long-term antibiotics. And I was told it would be for the rest of my life. So I went on them for 8 months.
Antibiotics for the rest of your life.
For the rest of my life.
Wow.
I went on it for 8 months. And it was funny because even when I was on it, on the antibiotics, I was taking macrobid, I still had the same symptoms as I did not even on, like when I was not even on it, like still urgency, frequency, pressure, but no bacteria. So I guess that's what they were trying to like push away, that she doesn't get the bacteria. Finally, though, after the 8 months and still like urinating every 15 to 20 minutes and still all the other symptoms, I couldn't go far from the washroom. I contacted him because my hair started to fall out. And I thought maybe that must be from the antibiotic because I was very healthy before all this. I had never needed to be on antibiotics that long. He argued, he pulled out this big, massive textbook because he didn't have a computer, like doctor textbook, and was saying like, no, macrobid does not do this. You should not be having hair loss, like you're fine. I decided to come off of it anyhow, and the symptoms still continued. When I was about 24, it was really starting to like get me down at this point. I was still working, but I was hiding, going to washrooms in between photocopying things, just trying to lay low so nobody would really notice.
In your job, right? You were working.
Okay. I was working, but I was trying to like still lay low because it was just an obnoxious amount of bathroom trips, and I was embarrassed. I was the youngest person in my career, and I was probably the sickest, and I was just embarrassed. And I just was like, I don't know what else to do. So I called him back, and another cystoscopy. And this time he said, I don't see anything at all. You're completely fine. And I kept saying, but I'm not. I pee every 15 to 20 minutes. And basically he said, some people just pee a lot. Like, that's okay. That's okay. And I just couldn't, like, I don't know. It wasn't okay. And it wasn't working for the career that I was in.
Right.
And it was just left off as you can take the antibiotics. I don't know what it's called, like PRN, like as the patient needs it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And then after that, I decided to start looking into like alternatives because I just believed that just wasn't going to work for me. So I wanted to try other things. And I don't know, it was only 9 years ago, but it seems like back then, like nobody really heard, well, in my circle and where I grew up, nobody heard about the naturopath or the functional doctor. Like nobody went to like the health food store for anything. It was like, whatever the doctor said was kind of like what you were doing. So when I started hearing about, oh, there's naturopaths, and then there wasn't one far from my home, I spoke to my family at the time because it was very expensive and I had just started my career.
Yeah.
And they were very on board. They said, whatever you need, Joia, like we're there for that.
That's awesome.
So then I started like the alternative avenue, like natural medicine.
Yeah. So, how many doctors did you speak with before you decided to go natural?
At that point, I had only, I think, seen 2 urologists, a walk-in clinic, and my family doctor.
Gotcha.
But from like this point on, I've seen over 7 urologists in 9 years. But at that point, I had only seen 3.
Gotcha. So when you got to the naturopath, what was the assessment at that point?
So basically, it was interesting. I didn't do any testing.
Oh.
Like all my testing came later on, like that knowledge. So when I went to the naturopath, they basically just heard out my story and they just started to mention things that I had never heard of before. So they compiled like a bunch of like tinctures for me to try to be able to wean myself off of the antibiotics, so that if I felt something coming on, I would be replacing it with the tinctures. Again, like teas as well. Like I had never heard of like marshmallow and corn silk and all of that. Like just through my upbringing. So like they mentioned things like that mixed with the tinctures. Diet change I didn't know about either. Like I grew up in an Italian home. Like we just ate a lot of carbs and sauces and things like that, processed foods. So then when they're telling me, oh, maybe you should cut out dairy, maybe you should cut out gluten, it's like, oh, really? Okay.
And that's your staple.
Yeah. 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 And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So we did, like we all jumped on board, like my family was all for it. So I started doing things like that and interjecting the tinctures and the teas. I actually was about UTI free till about 26 or 27, just from the tinctures and the teas.
Oh, nice.
And the diet change. I became vegan for 9 years.
Okay, so you became a vegan with the naturopath.
Yes, so I just decided to become vegan because they had mentioned how like meat and dairy and carbs were inflammatory. And I also grew up in a home where meat wasn't too big. It was just like maybe chicken. Like it was just a lot of carbs and chicken, things like that. Right. So just moving chicken was not really like a big deal for me. So I just fell into being full-blown vegan for 9 years. Yeah.
So why do you think if you were UTI free, what do you think changed that caused the UTIs to come back?
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I'm not quite sure. After I saw the naturopath, I did wean off the tinctures and the teas. Like I didn't do them right all the way. As like the UTIs and all that went away, I kind of just fizzled out of it, because what I forgot to mention was, yes, the bacterias were not coming back, but I still had the urgency, the frequency, the partial retention, the hesitation. So it was like, yay on one avenue that there was no UTI, but I was still chasing practitioners to try to figure out how can we stop the urgency and the frequency.
Right, and the hesitation.
So when I was under the care of that naturopathic team, they got the bacteria under control, but nothing else was like the symptoms were still there, and I still didn't have the best quality of life. Gotcha. So then after that, I decided to start functional medicine.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So
you were off of the teas, and you still had the symptoms, but you didn't have UTIs. So then was that about around the time that you met me, right after that?
Oh, no. I had lots more journeys before I met you. Before I met you, I saw 2 functional doctors. Okay. And that's when they started running tests, like the SIBO test, heavy metal test. Yeah. SIBO, heavy metal, a GI map test. Right.
The ones that you shared with me. Okay. So what were the results of those?
So I did have SIBO. I treated it twice.
Those of you listening, SIBO is basically bacteria in the small intestine. So we now understand the small intestine is not sterile. It does have bacteria, but the population of it is low. The biggest part of the intestine that has most of the bacteria is your large intestine. So what happens is sometimes bacteria from the large intestine creeps up to the small intestine through this ileocecal valve due to malfunctioning of the vagus. So when the vagus malfunctions for a variety of reasons, could be nutritional, it could be inflammation, it could be food driven, it could be stress related, the valve doesn't open and close, and then bacteria can drift up. And now you've got this bacteria up where it's not supposed to be. It starts to populate, and you get the symptoms of
bloating, like digestion issues. Yeah. It's kind of fluctuating, constipation, diarrhea. Well, my symptoms mainly were bloating and constipation.
Tell them about the bloating.
It's quite big, the bloating. Like you'll barely eat anything and you just pop right out, like you blow out. And it's uncomfortable, feels like your skin is stretching.
Yeah, she's shared pictures with me. I mean, she's a very thin woman. and she does. It looks like she's 3 months pregnant. And I had SIBO too, so I understand what that's like.
Yeah.
It's up here. You look like you're pregnant.
Yeah, and the smaller you are, the more embarrassing it is. Yeah. So I had the SIBO. I had heavy metals, predominantly mercury. I think actually 20 times the amount that's supposed to be normal.
That was shocking when I saw that, because my biggest question to you was, were you exposed to a lot of fish or amalgams in your teeth? Because normally when we see mercury that high, it's usually coming either from fish, from teeth, or from a ton of vaccines. And you're like, nothing abnormal. So my only thought process is, come from mom, because it can pass through the uterus. It pass through the placenta. It can actually pass. It can cross.
Yeah. So probably most likely that way through mom, because we didn't have the metals in the mouth or any of that. So, and just the normal vaccines that were required for school. Right. Parents didn't want to do any others.
Right.
So yeah, and then I did do like a protocol for the mercury through the functional doctor. It was very gentle though. I don't think it did anything, but I haven't retested.
Gotcha.
Yes. Oh, so then under the functional doctor, and I did a lot of like IVs as well, like the vitamin C IV, like the glutathione, because my immunity was so low. And I started getting more UTIs again when I was like about 26, 27. They started picking up again. So like they went
after the IVs?
No, like when I did the teas and the tinctures, they kind of went into like remission a couple years. And then they started again, like toward when I was like 26 or 27. And I actually don't know why. The only thing that changed was I started doing physiotherapy, pelvic floor physiotherapy. I don't think that would trigger it. It's like it's very clean. It's like an exam, but that was the only thing that I had kind of started to incorporate regularly. So I don't know why they came back. I really don't. I think my gut health I don't know. I feel like my gut got worse around that time.
Okay, then that's probably where it was coming from. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now you have to understand something too. For Joia and her SIBO, like everyone thinks that you have to have gut symptoms to have a leaky gut, intestinal permeability. It's actually a fallacy to think that everyone with leaky gut has symptoms. You can actually have a perfectly functioning gut in that you're going to the bathroom, you're not bloated, and you can find out that run a leaky gut test and you do still have leaky gut. So, because I know I hear that from a lot of people, like, well, I don't have any gut problems. I'm like, are you sure? If you have an immune problem, you have a gut problem, because 80% of your immune system is housed in your GI tract. So
even when I met you, I felt like I didn't have any gut issues either, because the bloating didn't happen till later on. And I kept saying, no, my stomach's fine. Like my bowel movements are fine, but yeah, I guess not. And taking all that antibiotics too, I think it really destroyed me.
Yeah, antibiotics can increase Clostridia, so it can create Clostridia overgrowth. So I wouldn't be surprised that the antibiotics could have been, even though they helped you, well, they actually didn't help you. They help a lot of people, but in your case, they didn't. But it could be that the antibiotics may have created the perfect environments for those infections to come back.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So it's almost like the tinctures were kind of masking the symptoms, and they weren't really addressing the root cause yet. They were just kind of acting like antibiotics, but more of a natural form of them. Interesting. So keep going. So after the naturopaths?
Yep. So after the naturopath, I rolled into the functional medicine, and we treated the SIBO. We did like a protocol for the mercury. I was getting the IVs weekly. Still nothing. I was still getting UTIs mixed in with that. Still the urgency, the frequency, all of that. After the functional doctors, I started seeing a herbalist. So again, kind of back on different tinctures and teas. She also kind of helped me, I guess, eat better. Like, I don't know. It was kind of like she helped me portion out my foods. I don't know, it didn't really work. So nonetheless, but I still went down that avenue with the herbalist. Then I did other different modalities, like the physiotherapy, the pelvic physiotherapy, the acupuncture, osteopath. I had a lot, I wasn't diagnosed with this per se, but I had a lot of body type fibromyalgia pain. As much as my IC worsened, I was always having chronic body pain. So like, again, the osteo, the acupuncture, I was just trying to get some relief because it just felt like my whole body was like concrete, like cement.
Right. You were inflamed.
Yes.
It was starting to manifest beyond the bladder, and it was starting to affect other parts of your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my
That
head.
around the time the female thing started happening, the endo.
Yes. So when I turned 26 years old, I thought it was bad enough that I had already spent like 5 years of my life with UTIs and IC and just not the best quality of life. I ended up having like a period, a menstrual period that literally like took me down like on the ground, like sweating, fever, crying, like yelling out in pain, like very dramatic, like out of nowhere.
Wow.
That started to happen every single month. And I started realizing I was calling in sick every month on my period. Like I just could not get up, like get up. So finally I thought, oh my God, I have to go and attempt the medical system again because I don't know what this is. So I go to the doctor and I get sent to like a gynecologist who specializes in like minimally invasive surgeries. Basically, they tell me, oh, just take like some birth control and stuff like that. And like, we'll see. So I take birth control, a couple different ones, more UTIs on the birth control.
Oh yeah, I'm not surprised. Birth control is a very known cause of UTIs.
And that's interesting because you said that, my other naturopath before I met you said that, but not the doctors didn't say that. They're like, oh, really, Joia? I never heard that before. So
Like it rapidly depletes vitamin B6 too. And that's, we talked about the importance of that one. So
yeah.
yeah.
So basically, I tried the hormones, couldn't stay on them because I believe in 8 months on birth control, I had 6 cultured UTIs.
Whew. Yeah, that's a lot.
It was bad.
And they were cultured, so there wasn't just the you actually could see them on a culture, so they were diagnosed by a doctor.
Yeah, I never guess anymore. I always culture and I wait till it comes back. Like I do not, yeah. So basically, I started doing ultrasounds and stuff to see what was going on down there. Not to make a long story short, from 26 till about a month ago, I had 15 pelvic ultrasounds, 1 MRI, 1 CT scan, 3 internal exams, and out of all of those, only 1 showed suspected adenomyosis, which is like a thickening of the uterus that causes just abnormal pain and bleeding, but just 1 out of all of those images. So basically, I consulted with 3 surgeons. 2 of them showed me the door saying there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. We will not be further investigating this or surgery. And at this point, I had to leave my career. I was mostly bedridden. I had debilitating pelvic pain every day. I had hip pain, leg pain, back pain. I had issues emptying my bowels. I had even more issues emptying my bladder because there was so much pressure and pain. I was starting to not even be able to do like simple tasks like throughout like in the house. Like I was just completely bedridden. And basically I just kept fighting and saying like something's terribly wrong. And I got my story into another surgeon's hands, and basically he said, you know what, we don't need to do any more imagery. You've done enough and it's not helpful whatsoever. You're not that young either. So if you're saying you have pelvic pain and gynecological pain, we need to go in and look like you're almost 30. So he took that chance on me, and I'm really glad that he did because it took me 3 years for somebody to listen. And basically, he even said, because nothing showed up, I can't guarantee that we're going to find anything. You need to understand this. Lots of consulting with like my partner and my family. And, everyone was very shocked. They were like, Joia, nothing's there. Like, let it go. I just couldn't let it go. Like I had lost my life, my job, like everything. I ended up.
It robs you. It robs you of everything.
It does, yeah. And even like weird symptoms, like I was like in chronic head pain, neck pain. I was sweating all through the night, like just weird symptoms. I would like talk about bloating. I would eat like a morsel of food and I would like be out to here. Like I just couldn't digest anything. And the surgeon kept saying, you know, these just sounds weird, digestive issues, bowel issues. He goes, something should be there, but I can't guarantee it. I said, whatever, I'm going to take the risk. As much as I didn't want to have surgery, I didn't know what else to do. So when I woke up, he basically said, like, thumbs up. He was like, you had extensive endometriosis. I had endometriosis wrapped all around my bladder, my right and left ovary, my right and left pararectal. I'm not sure what that is. I had it on my uterosacral nerves, which from my understanding helped the bowels and the bladder function. So that was all on my nerves, the endo. I had a hernia that was bulging out, wrapped in endo. And my uterus was covered in diffuse adenomyosis. So we'll need a hysterectomy eventually one day. And yeah, so that was all came out just 4 weeks ago. So I'm 4 weeks post-op. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, those of you listening can probably understand that. A couple of things that I got from that was, first of all, the imaging isn't always the best way to look for stuff. We know this with cancer studies because they don't always find them. Even with cancer studies, they don't always find the tumor. I think it's the same thing when they do a cystoscopy. I know when it comes to like celiac disease, then they're doing a biopsy. They're only checking, spot checking. It's not like they're biopsying the whole entire organ. And so they're hoping that they can catch something. And if the thing is inflamed enough, they'll probably will. But if it's in the early stages, they won't. The same thing with IC. That's why I don't like the cystoscopy, because it doesn't always show there's a problem, yet there's a problem. It just hasn't had enough time for it to show up. And that's actually a good thing, because if it's already showing up, you're advanced. You're advanced. You're in the advanced stage of the disease. So in your case, it took 3 years for the thing to advance enough where a little bit showed up on one image was enough. That doctor probably saw that and was like, you know what, with her age and that and all this, we're going to go in. Look at this. Look what they found. You were advanced. You were in the advanced stage of this hormonal dysfunction.
Yep. And the uterus showed like a bit of thickening, but as for all the endometriosis, like wrapped on all the organs, like nothing. Like, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, it was all covering the bladder. Like, they sent it out for pathology. It all came back stating it was endometriosis. And I just it was still it's a bit of a shock, because you have 3 years of all these images. And I forgot to mention too, I was in and out of the ER every few months, like just in debilitating pain. And everybody's like, I don't know, nothing's there. Maybe you're constipated, like just like the most ridiculous things. And yeah, and like, I don't know. And a lot of people or doctors just saying, you know, nothing's there, like get over it.
I hate that.
And that was just the hardest thing, because like they're surgeons, like they're up there, and like they do know for the most part, you'd think. And it was hard. It created like a lot of drama in my personal life, because here I am like dragging myself throughout the day, and we just left a doctor's appointment and they're saying, oh, Joia's in great health. But here I am in my own home, barely able to like lift the shopping bag. It almost looks like you're faking it.
Of course. Yeah, we all get that, because we look normal, but we're dying inside. And, you know, that's the problem. Is I think the biggest problem with people of your age when they get diagnosed is, how could it be you're young? But I'm going to tell you, my own son, we found mold and he was 9 and he had tons of symptoms. And at one point, my own son was telling me it hurt when he peed.
Oh.
Okay, it hurt when he peed. And I remember that was when I was like, oh no, boy, you are not going to get IC.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I investigated and found mold, and we did an organic acid test, and I found, you know, oxalates with him. So now let's understand something, guys. So she has this advanced pathology. Is that the cause of her IC? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it's a symptom. It's a major symptom.
For sure.
And it was because you had a lot of dysfunction happening much earlier that was it was misdiagnosed, it wasn't treated appropriately, so it was allowed to fester. Because I've always said to people, your body has the innate ability to heal. It's just like the analogy where I say, go ahead and cut your finger with, like, you know, give yourself a paper cut and watch. If that thing heals, your body knows how to heal stuff. The reason that you're not healing is because you're continuing to expose those organs to something that's causing the magic word, inflammation. So Joia was inflamed, and Joia was inflamed for a variety of reasons. So my job was to look a little deeper into some of the labs that she run additional labs, and find out what can we uncover with Joia and her health to understand why she developed adenomyosis, endometriosis, and IC. Why? Because it's not like Joia was just born with IC. It wasn't like she was just born with endometriosis. If that was the case, then I can say it's congenital. But she wasn't. It happened later in life. And why? So we ran some tests. She had some tests run. Go ahead and let's talk about what did we find. And you did mention the heavy metals.
Yes. So when I met Dr. Mandy, she mentioned something called an oats test, organic acid test.
Yep.
And basically I had never ran that before. So I said, yeah, no problem. That's fine. So it basically showed like a lot of things to do with like gut health and mold. And she had mentioned, Dr. Mandy, about oxalates. And I had heard that in the past, like on Facebook groups and things like that. But I never really like believed it. Like people would say, oh, reduce your, and I don't know, I never understood it. I never chose to investigate. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So then I was vegan for 9 years. So when I met Dr. Mandy and she asked about my diet, and I said, oh, like vegan, like, you know, heavy on the potato, the sweet potato, the nuts, all the dried fruits, the kale, the spinach. She's going, oh boy, like, and I'm going like, well, what do you mean? Like, it's healthy. Like, I feel great, but I wasn't feeling great. But I was just told, even by like, just like media and stuff, oh, vegan reduces inflammation. And it was like this big thing. And I was jumping in on board, and I did enjoy like the food as well, because I grew up, again, not big on meat. So it was my comfort level.
Of course.
And then, you know, Dr. Mandy mentioned, okay, well, if you're like, you know, if you're not opposed to it, to reintroduce some meats like fish and stuff, and it's healing, and try to switch your diet into a low FODMAP diet. Mm-hmm. It'll help with bloating and possibly SIBO if I still have it and things like that. And you mentioned to me not to reduce the oxalates too fast. Well, I didn't listen, and not unintentionally, but I just moved like my life into the low FODMAP life.
Yeah.
And it started dropping on its own.
Yeah, because low FODMAP diet typically would also be, in a lot of cases, it can also have a lot of low oxalate food. So you inadvertently went on a low oxalate diet by going low FODMAP.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I that on its own, the body like was dropped, because in like one day, the amount of like nut butter and dried, it was obnoxious actually, like the amount that I was consuming. So yeah, just within like, I want to say like 5 to 7 days, like the dumping symptoms they were rough. Yeah.
Can you explain what happened?
Yes, I can. So within 5 to 7 days or
that's
so.
That's about average. Did you have the honeymoon period at first for the couple of days where you're like, wow, I feel great, and then all of a sudden, bam? No,
it went right into like darkness, and then when the darkness passed, that's when I started feeling good, and I almost wanted to cancel my surgery. So when about 5 to 7 days after dumping the oxalates, I was warned by Dr. Mandy, like some of the things that could happen when you start dumping, like some hair loss, like if you had like an old injury, like it might start to act up. You could have like smelly urine,
cloudy.
Yeah, cloudy, pain when you pee, like burning, stuff like that. So I was like, okay. within 5 to 7 days, but again, I guess because I didn't really believe in it at first, my symptoms, I believe there was something, I was in the hospital over it. Like, I believe something was so wrong. I developed for a short span, I think it's called vulvodynia, where like your genital region pretty much is on fire. It's in like excruciating external pain. Like, I couldn't see anything to the eye, but I was in agony. I could barely sit down. I had to ice it. When I would urinate, it was like fire.
Yes. That's oxalate dumping.
Yeah, and I genuinely thought something was wrong. So I went to like the ER, that like they left the urine sample. Basically, they just told me to leave. Like, I was fine. So I had that, then that's passed, and then it turned into like the cloudy urine, like the smelly urine, hair loss. I had a knee injury as a teenager that started to hurt again, and I was like, what the? Like, it was really random. Now it's been since March. The only thing I experience now is like still sometimes when I pee, it, like not every day, but sometimes it'll be cloudy, and sometimes it'll still like have a bit of like an odor still. Kind of reminds me of like an asparagus odor. Like, I don't know.
That's a huge improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge improvement. So you're still dumping, which I would expect you will be for, okay, those of you listening, you're like, well, how long are we gonna dump? I don't know. I have no idea. Everyone's different. There's really not much you can do about it. I mean, it's just part of the human physiology. It depends on your biochemistry. It depends on your genetics. It depends on how long you've been high oxalate. It depends on if you have yeast, if you have mold, which we did find. So with it was mold yeast, and it was also some Clostridia, as I suspected. So she's working on her gut health right now. Like, that's where her focus is on as she's healing. So the point here is, going through the surgery was good because it removed a huge burden on her system, because all those adhesions that they found were putting a lot of pressure on her organs, and it wasn't allowing her bladder to empty appropriately. And as a result, the urine was staying behind. She was having retention, and that causes infections. Yeah, so if you guys are listening, one of the causes of the infections is urinary retention. Okay, in her case, it probably was that. Now, for what made things more complicated for Joia was the fact that she was on a high oxalate diet, which can create microbial imbalances in your GI tract, which does influence the bladder. We know this now, that what influences the gut influences the bladder. We know this. There's actually evidence that they're connected. The microbiomes are very connected. And to take it even further, the vaginal area is also strongly influenced by this. Did you have any vaginal symptoms?
When I was dumping, or just
at any point during your journey? Itching, yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis, irritation in the vaginal area, discharge? I think there was some of that.
Yes, but never like when it was swabbed, never infection. Like, I've never had a cultured yeast or BV infection, but I've had like what I think was like an infection, like off and on, but it was never like a real infection.
Gotcha.
So I'd say my main issues have mainly always been the bladder, and then now like the finding of the endometriosis.
Now, pH of the vaginal tract is very sensitive to diet. And so a lot of times what happens is the pH shifts and it becomes too alkaline. That creates even the slightest microbial imbalance. It doesn't have to be an infection. It could just be imbalance. And if you were to do like a shotgun sequencing, and you were to do functionality of the vaginal microbiome, you would probably find that it wasn't optimal for your age. And so what happens is these microbes are the ones that can penetrate into the urinary tract. We're finding the vagina seats the urinary tract. But where is the vagina coming from? It's coming from the gut. So it's gut, vagina, bladder. And so the gut is why we always go to when we're doing healing, because we're like, if we can moderate and modulate and influence the gut positively, then downstream it'll influence vaginal, which will then influence the bladder. But that doesn't happen overnight. That can take, and so going back to how long does this take? For someone like Joia, it could be a year-long process.
Yeah.
And you had that 3-month gap where you had all that those endometriosis things, which were, so going back to that, was putting a lot of strain on her internal organs, therefore creating this situation of retention. And with the retention, her urine isn't cleaning it out. So she's developing these biofilm infections. And that's where you started having all those UTIs. So my belief is, now that you have, can you tell me what your urine flow is like now?
Since the surgery, it's a lot better. Like, it's like as soon as I sit on the toilet, it kind of just comes right out. And that's not something I really knew about. Like, I'd be sitting there, it'd be like stop and go. It felt like I always would kind of come out of the bathroom and say to like my fiance, it feels like someone's like something squeezing the organ. That's why I'm in there taking so long. And when I would do physiotherapy with the endometriosis, because I didn't know I had it, a few days after physio, I would get that good stream flowing. But it's like after like maybe 72 hours, it's like I'd walk right back up again. And I never understood why. And neither did she really. She actually kind of pushed me to say, you know, laparoscopy is not a bad idea. Like, for your age, you might want to look into it, because we're doing so much work. It's costing you so much money. You're good for a few days, but then you're like back locked up again. Like, something's not allowing the muscles to stay relaxed.
Yeah, so, and that was because it had all the tissue around it. So my theory is that the physiotherapy loosened the ligaments and muscles that were attaching to it, but it didn't get rid of the actual endometriosis that was around it. So everything tightened right back up. So that's why it was so temporary. So what I think is going to happen over time, especially as you improve your gut health and reduce your inflammation, get your immune system to do its job, I think, and the urine's just going to kind of flow better. I think eventually you're going to be, UTIs are going to be a thing of the past for you. So I wanted to see what was it that really was the game changer for you, as far as anything that you learned working with me? Like, what was a big like aha moments for you?
Well, so far the oxalates and the focusing, even like on the gut health. It's like I always thought I ate healthy, but looking back, like, no, not really. And it's like even now when I eat now, it's like I eat the way like you taught me. Like, I'll have like a protein, like I'll have like a low FODMAP like vegetable. Sometimes like I'll have like a carb, like, and like with my supplements, I won't drink, like I chew like over 30 times before I swallow, like just like things like that. Like, I didn't know, like I really didn't know. And I used to always snack throughout the day. Like, I thought that was like a good choice. Like, I didn't understand that the stomach needs like time to rest. Like, I'm thinking, oh, I'm a petite woman. Like, I should be always snacking and eating.
Right. That's the fitness industry that makes us think that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then wonder, but I'm like eating all day, grazing food, like I'm so bloated. But it's like, okay, but you never even gave your stomach like a chance to rest. Like, I'd have like a bowl of cereal even at like 8 p.m. Like, no, like that's too late. You should like already have been finished by now. Like, it's just, I don't know. I thought I knew, but I didn't. So I learned a lot about like proper nutrition, about the oxalates, reducing inflammation. Like, even when I met you and I was like so like frustrated and sad, and like I remember you would always say about reducing inflammation, and in my head I'm thinking, but that's what I've been doing all these years. That's why I was vegan. Like, it didn't work. But it's weird. Like, as soon as the dumping started happening, like I started reducing. And like I mentioned to you before, like we went live, reducing my oxalates, I think, helped prep me for surgery, because I went into surgery pretty much with like the best functioning bladder. Like, I was so devastated to go into surgery, because I was like, my bladder feels so good. Like, and now because they use a catheter when you sleep. So I'm like, now
they're gonna shove this thing in me, and here we go again.
I was just so upset, because like, but it was, and I was saying with my partner, it's what I needed. Like, I needed to be at least even like 30% like better going into surgery, because like when you met me, like I could barely walk to the mailbox without having to like run back and pee. So like, it
You're
was helpful.
bedridden. You're bedridden, actually. I remember some of our appointments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So how are you different now? Like if you were to go back functioning wise, and I'm saying everything, so not just your bladder, brain, mental capacity, ability to remember things, brain fog, memory, moods, whole body aches and pains. You said the fibromyalgia, by the way, that's an oxalate thing. The
yeah,
fibromyalgia, the joint pain, or anything else that was, your period pain will improve over time. That's just give that like 3 to 6 months for your hormones
yeah,
to stabilize. But otherwise, if you were to go from how you were then to how you are now, and you're still healing, so you're not
yes.
healed, but healing, give
Yeah.
me a rating on how much improvement you think you've had so far.
Probably quite a bit. Like, it's still up and down too. Like, it is not like I'll have like 3 or 4 days where I'm like out and about in the town and almost like as if nothing ever happened to me. But then I'll have like a day where it is still like the blankets on me and I'm resting and I'm like upset. So it's not, it is linear, like it's up and down. It's
Yeah,
not
it's up and down. Yeah, it's like a roller coaster. Yeah.
but it's nice to see that there have been better days. And when I did meet you, I was like, it was really bad. Like I could barely put sentences together. Like I remember
I
saying,
remember.
yeah, like, and I
And you
didn't.
got so frustrated with yourself, Joia. You'd say, Mandy, I promise you, I'm an intelligent person. I have a degree. I went to college. I know what I want to say. I just can't say it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember.
couldn't believe, even like in the evening, like I'd say to my partner, like even getting up to get the TV remote, I would be crying. Like I'd have that much body pain just to get up. And I thought this would be forever. Like I really did, because it came on and it wasn't leaving. And I just thought this is going to be my life forever. But yeah, no, now I can get up and I get my own remote. I go for 2 walks a day. um I have like my supplements now, like the ones that like work for me. Like I'm doing better and I hope to keep getting better, because like I know with endometriosis it can grow back and things like that. So I'm just hoping to be able to keep improving the inflammation, focusing on the gut health. And
We'll do a hormone panel on you and we'll find
yeah,
out what's going on hormonally. There's things you can do to help keep if it's estrogen, usually estrogen driven, there's things that we can evaluate in your environment to kind of keep the estrogen where it needs
yeah.
to be.
So I'm looking forward to still continuing to dig a little deeper, but also just to kind of also find a little peace too. Like,
Of course.
some fun things, like get back and out. I do want to be able to go back to work in some capacity. I had to take a leave of absence. So yeah, I'm just, I don't know, kind of still day by day. Like, and yeah, we'll have to see.
Well, if before we end today, I want to ask you one really important question for everyone. How talk about the importance it is for support. So, and all kinds of support, which is friends, family, loved ones. Because I know my personally in my first marriage, I got divorced because my ex-husband wasn't supportive, and he told me get over it, like what your doctors told you to do. And I knew that I knew in my right mind that if I ever married him and I had cancer, he would leave me. So that's why I was done with him. And now I have wonderful Terry, and he is my biggest supporter and my biggest fan. And I wouldn't know what I would do without him. So talk about the importance of support and also how to find a practitioner who's going to listen.
Of course. So the support wise, I was very lucky myself. So because I got diagnosed with IC at 21 years old, at that point I still lived with my family, my mom and dad and my sister. Um, and I had a lot of support. I had a lot of support financially. I had a lot of support emotionally. My mom came to all my appointments with me because I was scared, I was nervous, and she said, whatever you need, you just tell me. So she was always there for me. It was still lonely though. Like, I mean, as much as you have like people there, it's still very lonely because nobody in my family had IC or has it. But knowing that they were there for me, it meant a lot. And I caused a lot of drama with being so unwell. So I'll never be able to like repay them and thank them enough.
Oh, I don't think they want that. They just want you well.
And then as I got a little bit older, I met my partner, and then we started to, come together, and he took more of the front line with being my support system because he saw me every day, right? And
Yeah, he saw you in pain.
yes, and he was actually the one that encouraged me to reach out to you because I had done like all those practitioners before, and we were just starting to try our life again. And I said, just one more chance, one more. And he said, Joia, do whatever you want. Like, you don't need to ask my permission. Like, no, you go and whatever, we'll take care of the payments and whatnot. And I'm here for you, whatever. And, he took over, and it's been me and him now. And even when I decided I wanted to do the surgery, despite all the tests showing nothing was there, my mom and dad said, you know what, you do it, and we'll be there waiting outside for you, and we'll come by every day to visit you. And so I had the support there, and the support with taking time off work. And I was in a dark place though at the time, and even though everybody was there for me, I did shut out a bit, and I did keep to myself just because I was upset and angry. Like, why do I have IC and endometriosis and adenomyosis and no one else does? Like, not that I wish it on them, but when you just wonder, like, why me? Like, why nobody else?
Yeah.
And
or even in your family, like, nobody in my family has this. Where is this coming from?
yeah, nobody in mine either. And I just felt like, what the heck? And again, like I expressed, like, like the doctors I went to telling me to get over it or just go pee and like move on. And, when I met you, you had IC, and it was just, it's like, it was different talking to you. It's like, you knew where my like anger came from. You knew the frustration, you knew like just the drainedness in my face, like just everything about it, like you had experienced it at one point or another, the loneliness, the emptiness, the financial struggle. So, I mean, it was nice to know that, like, I could talk to you or like tell you how I felt. And like, even if it sounded like silly or ridiculous at one point or time, you probably felt the same way as well. So it was just nice to meet somebody that I could also see that came out of it as well, so that there is some hope and positivity that if you like work hard and keep trying, that you can improve. Like, even if it doesn't get to being perfect, like I'm okay with that, but even just to have a decent quality of life, something better than even like when you met me or even when my partner met me, like it's an improvement within itself.
Everything that changes positively is an improvement. It can be
Yes.
just the extra 15 minutes between bathroom breaks. It could be that walk to the mailbox and back. Because what happens is over time, it becomes cumulative. So although it might seem small now, but I always relate this to my, when I used to be in the weight loss industry, where people used to complain about their weight loss being really slow. And sure, it feels like that when you're in the moments, but when you look at the start to finish, you lost 30 pounds. You know what I mean? So that's the same thing. And that's why I like the tracking thing that we do together with the spreadsheet, because I'm like, okay, where were you? Oh, symptoms were here. Now, where are you now? Because we forget, we're doing it every day and we forget what we had, what we were like before. And that's why it's good to have partners like yours, because he will remember. Joia, remember when you were like this? Because Terry has to do this with me all the time. Reality check, Mandy. Because sometimes I complain too. I'm like, oh gosh, this stupid thing. And
Yeah.
Reality check, Mandy. Where were you 3 years ago? Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's why the documentation helps too, because you'll be like, wow, today I peed like 7 times less than yesterday. And it's like, me and my partner are like, woohoo, like from the kitchen. Like, so, yeah.
That's great, Joia. I'm so happy to hear this. And secondly, thank you for coming today, sharing your story. Guys, listening, she is on my Facebook page. So, and she loves to share her story. So, what is your Facebook profile's name? Your Facebook profile? Your
like
Jay.
just Jay. So Jay Francesca.
Jay Francesca. So if you see, I've tagged her. That's who she is. And so she's on the page, and she's very, very. She's an open book. So if you guys, have any questions or need somebody to talk to,
yeah, for sure,
definitely bring them to you.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Mandy.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yes, thank you.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Bye.